When Emily and Mark Collins moved into the Harper house on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, they believed they had found the perfect escape from their busy lives. The old colonial home, with its faded white paint and towering chimneys, was steeped in history. It sat quietly amid overgrown hedges and towering trees, its windows like watchful eyes from a forgotten time. Emily, a writer fascinated by local legends, was drawn to the house's eerie charm. Mark, tired of city noise, welcomed the solitude. The realtor had mentioned the house's colorful past, but she had smiled politely and quickly changed the subject when asked for details. Locals whispered of a terrible massacre that happened there nearly a century ago, the Harper family slaughtered in their own home, their screams echoing through the night. The killer was never found, and the house had stood empty ever since, as if frozen in time. The first few days were uneventful. Emily explored the house with fascination, her fingers tracing the cracked wallpaper and faded portraits lining the halls. Mark began fixing the creaky floors and peeling paint. But soon, subtle changes began to unsettle them. One morning, Emily woke to find the living room rearranged. Chairs that had stood neatly by the fireplace were toppled. A heavy wooden table was overturned, and portraits hung crookedly. Mark insisted he hadn't touched anything. They found no footprints or signs of forced entry. That night, the house began to change more drastically. Walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if alive. The air grew thick with the scent of smoke and iron. The house was rebuilding itself, not renovating, but reconstructing the layout it had during the night of the massacre. Doors creaked open by themselves, leading to rooms that had vanished hours before. Hallways stretched and twisted, confusing their sense of direction. They became trapped in a nightmare maze where the house remembered every detail of that bloody night. Ghostly figures began to appear, shadowy silhouettes of the Harper family and their assailants. Screams and cries echoed through the halls, repeating endlessly. The house was forcing Emily and Mark to watch the massacre unfold again and again. But it didn't stop there. The house demanded their participation. One evening, Mark found himself standing in a recreated dining room, clutching a rusted knife, the weight of unseen hands guiding him toward the table where a spectral family sat frozen in terror. He struggled to resist, but the house's grip was too strong. Emily heard voices whispering to her, urging her to speak words she didn't recognize, pleas for mercy and forgiveness, spoken through her lips as if by another soul. They realized they weren't merely observers, the house had trapped them inside the nightmare, forcing them to become part of the horrific event it was cursed to relive. Desperation drove Emily to search for answers in the house's forgotten corners. Beneath a loose floorboard, she discovered dusty journals belonging to the Harper family. The diaries revealed a web of betrayal, jealousy, and a dark curse placed upon the family, a curse that doomed them to relive their final night over and over. Armed with this knowledge, Emily and Mark tried to break free. They sought the heart of the house's darkness, a hidden room where the final, violent act occurred. But the house resisted. Walls shifted like living flesh, corridors twisted into impossible angles, and phantom screams filled the air. In a final, desperate act, Emily recited a passage from the diary aloud, asking for forgiveness and release. The house shook violently, the spectral reenactments fading as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. At dawn, the front door creaked open, and Emily and Mark stepped outside, gasping for fresh air and sunlight. But as they drove away, Emily glanced back, catching a glimpse of a shadowed face staring from an upper window, a silent reminder that the house remembers and waits. When Michael and Sarah Thompson first saw the house on Maple Street, it was love at first sight. The modest two-story Victorian stood quietly amidst towering oaks in a peaceful Chicago suburb, its faded brick exterior and weathered porch promising a fresh start. Newly married and eager to settle down, they imagined a life filled with warmth and laughter inside those walls. What they didn't expect was the darkness lurking beneath their very feet, something that had been waiting for years, silent and unseen. The first few days after moving in were typical, unpacking boxes, painting walls, and exploring the neighborhood. The house creaked and groaned like old timber often does, and Sarah often found herself drawn to the narrow staircase near the living room. Something about it felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the air around the stairs always seemed colder, heavier. At night, when the house settled into silence, Sarah sometimes thought she heard the faintest whisper, a soft voice calling her name, or perhaps asking for help. Michael was skeptical. "It's just the house settling," he'd say with a reassuring smile. But one chilly autumn evening, as Sarah lay in bed, the voice returned, clear and plaintive, "Help me, please." She sat up, heart pounding, straining to locate the sound. It seemed to come from right beneath the staircase. The next day, Michael pulled aside the wooden paneling beneath the stairs. To his surprise and confusion, there was no hidden space, no basement, no crawl space, no secret room. Just solid wood and nails. "It's impossible," he said, shaking his head. "There's nowhere for a voice to come from." But the voice persisted. Over the next week, the calls grew more desperate. Sometimes a child's giggle echoed faintly, other times, sobbing or whispered warnings. Sarah felt chilled to the bone whenever she approached the stairs. Objects near the staircase occasionally shifted or fell without explanation. The atmosphere in the house changed, an oppressive sadness settled over the rooms. Determined to uncover the truth, Michael began digging into the house's history. He found old newspaper clippings in the local library that told a troubling story. Decades ago, a boy named Tommy had lived in the house with his family. One stormy night, Tommy vanished without a trace. Neighbors reported hearing his cries and pounding on the walls, but when authorities searched, no sign of the boy was ever found. Official reports claimed he ran away, but whispered rumors suggested a far darker fate. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah felt a renewed urgency. One evening, she followed the voice again. "Help me," it called, trembling and weak. Her fingers traced the wood beneath the stairs, and something unexpected happened. The surface softened, almost like skin. The outline of a small door shimmered faintly. Heart pounding, Sarah pressed her palm against it, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black tunnel. The air inside was cold and damp, thick with the smell of earth and decay. Sarah hesitated, but the voice called again, "Please, help me." She took a deep breath and descended. The tunnel twisted downward, the walls seemingly closing in around her. At the end of the passage, she saw a small, pale figure curled in the corner, a translucent boy with hollow eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. "Tommy?" she whispered. The child nodded, reaching out with trembling hands. "I've been trapped here for years beneath the stairs. Please don't leave me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she grasped Tommy's hand. Suddenly, the tunnel walls groaned and began to move, closing in like jaws ready to snap shut. Sarah pulled the boy, running desperately back the way she came. Shadows reached for them, cold fingers clawing at their clothes and skin. She stumbled but kept moving, heart hammering. Bursting through the secret door, Sarah slammed it shut, sealing the tunnel behind them. The house fell silent once more, the air growing lighter as if a great weight had lifted. From that night forward, the voice was gone. No more whispers, no more chilling cold spots. Michael and Sarah nailed iron stakes along the staircase's edge and sprinkled salt at the threshold, hoping to keep whatever darkness remained at bay. Though the house returned to its peaceful charm, Sarah sometimes found herself lingering near the stairs, wondering if Tommy's spirit was finally free. And on the quietest nights, when the wind is still and the house breathes softly, she swears she hears a small, grateful whisper from beneath the stairs. When Ava and Eric Jensen bought their dream home in the quaint town of Asheville, Pennsylvania, they had no idea what waited for them inside. The Victorian house was a beautiful relic from the late 1800s, its stately brick facade and ornate woodwork promising charm and history. They had fallen in love with the sunlit rooms, the grand staircase, and the sweeping views of the town below. But it was the long hallway on the second floor that held their attention most, a narrow, dimly lit corridor where an imposing antique clock hung above a carved wooden mantel. The clock was unlike any they had ever seen. Its brass hands moved backward, ticking in reverse, counting down instead of up. The realtor had been oddly silent when Ava asked about the clock, quickly changing the subject. Eric joked it was a family heirloom stuck in an endless loop, but Ava's unease grew. They moved in excitedly, eager to start their new life, but from the first night, the clock's backward ticking haunted their dreams. It was rhythmic, persistent, echoing down the hallway like the pounding of a heart running in reverse. On their first night, Ava lay awake in bed, eyes fixed on the clock's face through the darkness. Each tick seemed louder than the last, the hands inching steadily backward, erasing time with a sinister patience. She tried to convince herself it was just a quirk of an old mechanism, but the weight of the sound pressed against her chest. Eric laughed when she mentioned it the next morning, saying, "It's just an old clock, honey. Nothing to worry about." But Ava knew better. Days passed, and the clock continued its backward march. With every hour that passed, Ava felt the house grow colder, the shadows lengthen unnaturally. At random times, the clock would stop ticking altogether, plunging the hallway into an eerie silence that was somehow louder than the ticking. Then, without warning, it would start again, louder and more frantic. One evening, Ava was unpacking boxes in the living room when she heard whispers coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was Eric, but when she called out, no answer came. The whispers weren't human, they were fragmented words in a language she didn't recognize, urgent and pleading. The sound seemed to synchronize perfectly with the backward ticks, creating a chilling chorus that filled the entire house. That night, Ava's dreams twisted into nightmares. She dreamed of time unraveling, of clocks shattering and spilling dark liquid onto the floorboards. She saw faces trapped inside clock gears, their mouths opening to scream but no sound escaping. When she woke, she found the clock frozen at the number 9, the hands motionless, suspended in time. The following day, Eric vanished. Ava found his side of the bed empty. The front door was locked from the inside. She searched every room, but he was gone without a trace. On the kitchen table lay a note, written in Eric's handwriting but shaky and uneven, "The countdown ends soon. Don't try to stop it." Panic set in. Ava tried to leave the house, but every exit was sealed. Windows refused to open, doors slammed shut just as she reached for the handle. The house was a trap, a prison bound by the ticking clock. Desperate for answers, Ava sought out Mrs. Calloway, Asheville's oldest resident and local historian. The woman's eyes were sharp beneath a crown of silver hair as she listened to Ava's story. "That clock," she said slowly, "was made by a man obsessed with fate and time, a clockmaker named Elias Crow. Legend says he cursed it to count backward, marking the time until the house would claim its next victim." Ava shivered. "Claim? What do you mean?" Mrs. Calloway's voice lowered. "The house isn't just old wooden bricks. It's a vessel, a doorway. When the clock hits 0, whoever is trapped inside becomes part of it, lost to a realm outside time. Some say Elias trapped his own soul there long ago, and the clock counts down to when it will feed again." That night, the clock ticked louder than ever. Ava's heart pounded in sync with the backwards counting. She wandered the dark halls, the whispers growing louder, turning into voices calling her name, begging for release. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding like lungs. The air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. When the clock struck 3, the house shifted. Walls pulsed like flesh, floors rippled like water. A swirling vortex appeared in the hallway, a dark maw that sucked in light and sound. Ava felt herself drawn toward it, her body pulled by an invisible force. She screamed, fighting with every ounce of strength, but the house was merciless. The vortex enveloped her, dragging her into a cold, timeless void. She was weightless, suspended between moments, surrounded by lost souls trapped in the endless backward ticking. Faces appeared, some pleading, some twisted with despair. They reached for her, whispering the same words, "Don't forget the countdown." Ava's vision blurred as the void closed around her. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the house, the clock's hands reset to 12, beginning the countdown anew. She was trapped in a loop, another victim caught by the clock that counts down. Days later, the realtor showed the house to a new family. They marveled at the antique clock and its strange backward ticking, unaware of the terror it hid. The house waited patiently, counting down to its next victim.